All right, Suzuki Science, grade 11s. We did Digestion last week, and I did want to just make a quick video to talk about some of the things that were in your lesson. So a number of you did the cracker activity. Great. It's disgusting to leave something like that soggy, all wet and yucky in your mouth, but you did it. And if you found out it tasted sweet, and then you read through the lesson, you would have realized that there is a salivary amylase that its job is to break down starch, long glucose molecules, into smaller glucose molecules. Normally, this just goes into five, kind of really oligosaccharides, is what we call them. But if you leave it in your mouth long enough, you'll break it down much further until you get to the sweet taste of a maltose or maybe even a glucose. Spiciest food. So. Oh, I have a plant. I meant to. Let me grab it. Okay. Yep, I just materialized with this plant. I went to the greenhouse the other day looking for some vegetables we could put in our vegetable garden, and they only had like 3 things. Swiss chard. I don't even know what that is. They had some kind of hot pepper, and then they had this super hot pepper. Butch, tea, Trinidad, scorpion. Up to 1.5, almost 1.4 million Scoville units. For those of you who did the activity, you probably saw the Scoville unit measurement, and it is something that's used to measure how spicy a food is. Spice and pain are very close in the receptors in the tongue. That is why when you eat really spicy food, you genuinely feel pain. We'll talk more about that in the grade 12 course. So some of you, I think one of you said you had a ghost pepper, and that you had a relative who tried it and they were fine. But you have to be very careful. If you're not used to taking in very spicy foods, even people who are used to eating very spicy foods, if you take something that is significantly more spicy than what you're used to, you can put yourself in a great deal of pain. You'll have all the sympathetic nervous system reactions. You'll start sweating. You'll start doing some weird things with your belly and your eyes and your skin, and it's not the most pleasant situation. But I guess everyone has to try it at least once. So the question here was, is there an age-related sensitivity to spiciness? When you are younger, you'll notice that often things like your eyes, you probably don't know this right now, but so many of you have really good vision, you have 20/20 vision or close to it. You can see at 20 feet what a normal person sees. And that's what 20/30 versus 20/10 versus 20/40. And as you get older, the muscles that control your lenses, they trophy, right? They don't work as well. And so you might not be able to see as far or be able to focus on things far quickly, and then you have to get glasses. Or might be myopic and you can't see things that are close to you. So same thing happens with your speed. You might be your peak sprinting speed at 16, 18, 21, 24, but then as you get older, these muscles are not as, I'll say young, there's more to it, as they once used to be, and you'll slow down. Other senses, you could hear well when you're 20, and then if you're listening to loud music or you're in a very loud environment, you might damage your receptors in your ears, and then you can't hear as well as you get older. Taste is similar. As you subject your tongue to the spice, you're not damaging the receptors. The receptors are constantly being replenished, but you don't have the same dearth of receptors as you did when you're younger. So in many cases, you'll notice older people who are used to spices will have to put more spices in their food in order to be able to taste it in the same way. And that same person who's at 60, who's having extreme spice, and they're like, oh, okay, this is kind of spicy. A person younger might be over-spiced because of all the sensory receptors that are on their tongue and other places in their mouth. So there is age related to the ability to detect spice. But then there's also environmental cues, genetic cues, and other things that determine your baseline for spiciness. Another thing I wanted you to see was I want you to notice and look at that the spiciness is related to the culture, right? So a lot of cultures around the world will spice their food in a certain way. And there's been a hypothesis that has since been demonstrated to be remarkably true, that the countries that are in the equatorial regions, the foods that they had historically would spoil or rot much more quickly. And a lot of people, as long as it's, near the beginning stages of being spoiled or just before it gets spoiled, if you put the right kind of antibacterial agents on it, it'll prevent the bacteria from decomposing the food. And a lot of spices have these antibacterial agents inside of them. And so these spices that we associate with heat, they also have the ability to prevent the food from rotting. And so a lot of tropical countries have these very spicy foods. And the belief is that these spicy foods are historically associated with the humans in that area understanding that these would prevent the food from going bad. Or if they did start, it would kind of mask the taste. And as you move further north into the colder climates, this spice was not as necessary. So when you look at Europe and Scandinavia and up in the northern climates, you wouldn't see the same kind of spice as you do in India and sub-Saharan Africa and northern part of South America and places like that. So that is something I did put in some of your worksheets as a link to Darwin Gastronomy, so you can read more about that, because I think you'd be interested based on how you answered the question. The Padlet. I asked you to put together, I assigned each of you a location on here, and looking at this. So the very first part for digestion, it starts with the brain. I can start talking about the burger or the T-bone, or if you're vegetarian, I'm not sure what makes your mouth water, but if I start talking about food, and especially if it's, you haven't eaten in a while, then your brain takes in that information and it will start to cause you to salivate, and you might hear your stomach growling, and so you have a part of your brain in the cortex, the gustatory cortex, that's responsible for initiating you getting ready to eat. So the gustatory cortex, that should be first. After that, the food comes in your mouth. So there's a bunch of things. Really, your teeth, of which you should know the different types, the incisors, the canines, the molars, the premolars, and so on. They're all responsible for tearing the food up mechanically. Then your salivary glands, which are also in your oral cavity, will dump in some saliva, which is mostly water, but it also has amylase to start the chemical digestion. Your tongue will take that saliva and mix it up, and then pushes it to the back of the throat. You'll notice that in the PowerPoint, I showed you a picture of a tongue, I think, of a cow tongue. The tongue that you guys are familiar with, you only see the little tiny tip, but your 4-pound tongue, most of it is at the back of your throat. It pushes it to the pharynx, which is a common area between your respiratory system, the nose, and the digestive system, right? So the back of your throat. To prevent food from going up into your nasal cavity, we have that little thing that dangles at the back, the uvula. And you see it when, those kids in the cartoons are screaming as they go down a roller coaster or screaming for food, and you see it dangling at the back of the throat. When you swallow, the uvula goes up. It's not watertight. You could still get food and water, for those of you who went upside down, that will go through your pharynx, up into your nasal cavity and out your nose. That will happen. But it does a pretty good job of directing the food downwards. Some people, if you go on YouTube, you'll see they'll take a spaghetti noodle and they'll push it up into their nasal cavity and they'll pull it out their nose, and that's really disgusting. They have it out their mouth and their nose at the same time. Really? Why? Okay, so your epiglottis, which you're learning about this week, is preventing food from going down your trachea, because if food goes down your trachea, you will asphyxiate, and that is not a good thing. All right, so uvula and the epiglottis are at the back of the throat in the pharynx, and that brings us to the esophagus. The esophagus is your food tube. At the top of the esophagus, there is a sphincter muscle, but it's pretty much always open. And it opens automatically as soon as food touches it, and then it will I'll make sure food goes one way. Once the food's in the esophagus, there is another sphincter muscle at the very bottom that prevents stomach contents from going back in the esophagus. In grade 10, we learned what happens if that is not working properly. You get heartburn. Stomach's divided into several regions: the fundic region, the pyloric region. We didn't talk about that. And in the stomach, you get protein digestion. You should learn about that whole pepsinogen and how that works. That was all in the PowerPoint. And then from the stomach, you get into the small intestine. The first part of the small intestine is called the jejunum. The duodenum. Where are you? Duodenum? Okay, so no one did the duodenum. So in the small intestine, we have the duodenum. Do that. Duodenum. Super important. So the food empties out of the stomach into the duodenum. The liver has so many different roles. The pancreas, the gallbladder is with the liver, and so the pancreas, it's responsible for producing all those enzymes. So the major actions of digestion are thanks to the pancreas, and then the pancreas also releases sodium bicarbonate. The gallbladder releases the fat digesting molecule, the bile, which is produced by the liver, and it's responsible for many things, some of which we'll talk about in grade 12. So that happens in the duodenum, and then that moves along into the jejunum and ileum, where you get the absorption. So when we make the connection between digestion and circulation, it's here in the jejunum where you need to make that connection. We're going to come back to the Padlet next week when we do the final system, circulation, which brings everything, respiration, digestion, all together, and other systems we talk about in grade 12. So in grade 12, your knowledge of the circulatory system should be good. Inside the jejunum, we have the villi, which are the major finger-like projections that are responsible for absorption of nutrients. And the villi themselves are covered in microvilli. And so in there you have the blood vessels, you have the lacteal, and they all get absorbed. That was a major part of the video that I created for you. And then anything that doesn't get absorbed there gets pushed into the large intestine, known as the colon. The colon, the large intestine, is divided into several regions. You got the ascending, you got the sigmoid, the ascending, the transverse, the descending, and this is responsible for mostly taking in the water. If the colon is not working properly, if it takes up too much water, you end up with diarrhea, constipation. Takes up too little water, you end up with diarrhea, unpleasant. At the end of the colon, you have the rectum, which holds your feces until a socially acceptable time, and then you have two anal sphincter muscles. The first one is, we need to use a bathroom. It sends a message to your brain, but you might not be in a bathroom, so you have to hold it, and then when you're ready, you have conscious control over the second set of anal sphincter muscles, and that's when you poo in the toilet or wherever. So that is the Padlet, and that is the order of the digestive piece, and many of you show me that in your worksheet. So what else was in here that I wanted to talk about? Minerals, you guys did a good job, generally speaking, if you did it. The microbiome is fascinating. It connects the bacteria stuff we talked about at the beginning of the course with the systems. We have more bacterial cells inside our body than human cells. The end of this meal task. Wow. Okay, so I have so many meals to try here. So I plan on trying all of them at some point. And as I try them, I will share pictures with you over the summer so you can see if I've had success. They're all incredibly healthy. And some of you have given me a lot of details, so I don't know if I'll make the whole thing because it's like the whole meal, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'll probably just make the dinner one. Smoothies and burrito bowls, and there's more than one burrito, so I guess that's popular. And the burritos are spread out throughout the day: breakfast burrito, lunch burrito, evening burrito, salad, and some pictures of you who actually made these already recently, and you took those pictures and recorded them. So lots of different meals here, and as I said, I'm looking forward to trying them, and I'll let you know how it works out. So thank you for putting those meals up, and then in your document you did a very good job of picking 1, 2, or 3 different nutrients and explaining how they were absorbed. Everything gets absorbed for the most part in the small intestine. All right. The banana split case study was done well. And that's it. So that's the digestive system. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the digestive learning, and now you're doing respiration, and I'll see what you have to learn about that and talk about that next week.